Oh, I have to admit, as I stood on this stage and right before you, I want to just declare it. I am the world's greatest high school dropout. You see, when I was growing up and through the fact that I dropped out of high school, I was amazed by the rich and famous. I always wondered what made them so rich and famous. After all, I watched a show, and it might date me right now, The Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, Robin Leach's show. I see clearly we're a room full of young people. No one knows who Robin Leach or the rich and famous are. But I loved it. I thought to myself, if I dropped out of high school, what can I learn from the rich and the famous? So I was obsessed with learning exactly what made them so rich and famous. After all, they kind of looked like me. They spoke normal. They breathed the same air. I mean, what made them so different from me, right? And so I studied them for 30 years. I learned from icons, legends, and gods of commerce and culture. Hundreds of actors, actresses, musicians, heads of state, billionaires, CEOs, and even members of the royal family. In all that time, in 30 years, I codified what made them so, well, rich and famous. And what I came to realize is that they shared an interesting DNA. They had an incredible series of characteristics. They had this series of attitudes, and they had a really consistent series of behaviors. So between these characteristics, attitudes, and behaviors, I still was haunted by the idea of, but was there one thing, at least one thing, that made them so powerful? And I discovered it. It was this one thing that made them uniquely powerful. And it wasn't that they were curious. They were ferociously curious. I mean, when you think about what ferocious curious means, I mean, curious finds new streets, but ferociously curious discovers new lands. Curious discovers new restaurants, but ferociously curious infuses different eclectic approaches to cooking something new and concoctive. The reality for me is that there's a difference in the distinction between being curious, which brought you into this room today, but ferociously curious, which could massively shift or irreversibly transform the way you experienced your life out. I would assert that being ferociously curious lives at the epicenter of human achievement and performance. I believe that ferociously curious makes you a celebrated author, makes you searching for your next why, being able to in fact create and curate such an incredible voice, because you're ferociously curious to know, is there more? So I made a curious case for curiosity, because curiosity by definition is to learn or know something new. And so, making the curious case for curiosity, it came down to four things. CASE serves as a great acronym for people who are as old as I, who have a memory that's really, quite frankly, well, debilitating. For me, understanding that creating a curious case for curiosity means, first of all, challenging the things you already know. Then being able to ask questions even though no one wants to answer them. Being able to then search for new information even though they say it doesn't exist. But my favorite of the four is to explore in the darkest areas of your life and existence, to find new possibilities in the very things and the essence that can in fact fuel you being far more curious and, dare I say, ferociously so. So in the time that I got to really formulate and fortify exactly this thesis, that the rich and the famous, who are no different from you or I, because you can be ferociously curious too, they actually unleash a series of phenomenon when they lean into being ferociously curious. And they're never stopped by what or how or why. They are always driven by stating, why not? Not asking why not. It is, after all, very Canadian to be, well, why not? I'll assume so. We are in the land of the three C's, cheap, conservative, and chicken. So as a result, we are quite conservative. We will play small. We will get stuck, stalled, or stopped because it's just, well, good to be so. Good citizenship. So being ferociously curious is a function of not just your series of characteristics, but also your attitude and your behaviors. Now, I witnessed the phenomenon. Phenomenon, by definition, is something that's remarkable. Something that happens that wasn't there before. That's a phenomenon. A phenomenon is being able to, in fact, realize, discover, and live out and or experience firsthand something that wasn't there before you got there. So if you're in the phenomenon living business, I would suggest that you understand these 3 stories. You see, the first was when I first learned firsthand the first phenomenon. And it was a result of a celebrity I was working with by the name of Horacio Pagani. Now, for those who don't know Horacio Pagani, he's an artist that so happened to have built the world's fastest car. It's also the world's most expensive. You too can own one for $5.7 million US. I am on the waiting list and hope I'm never called. But kidding all aside, this man builds supercars. World's fastest, most beautiful. He's clearly curious. But when I sat with him and I said, by Horacio Pagani, why wouldn't you take your design genius and apply it into other realms in industry, other vertical markets, other ways to apply your creative genius? And he said, ma please, ¿por qué? Why? And I said, why not? So he turned being curious into being ferociously curious. And to this day, not only did we launch a new division under his name, Pagani Arte, that business now designs private jets, shoes, clothing, and just launched last month a residential development in Miami Beach, bearing his name, where all the textures in this building and outfitted with his design touch. If he was curious, he'd stick to the car business, but he was ferociously curious, and so now he's in many businesses. This unleashed the first phenomenon, and I would call that the phenomenon of creative genius. The second I witnessed a few years later when I had the opportunity of meeting with and understanding firsthand the magic and power of a singer you may have heard of named Taylor Swift. Now I know, an up-and-comer, but one of the most amazing things about this musician, aside from writing her own music and taking ownership over her own stuff, she does something that's uniquely, ferociously curious, which when leveraged, unleashes a new phenomenon. That phenomenon is called the phenomenon of collaboration. Now, collaborating is a phenomenon, the experience, something remarkable that happens as a result of being ferociously curious. Now, if you know her music, if you followed her stuff, and know firsthand that she doesn't have fans or followers, she's got Swifties. I mean, these are faithful people. I mean, we're not talking about a community, we're talking about an army. And we're not talking about just trinkets and trash that bear her name. I mean, she's gamified a community that measures in the billions. It is the modern day Beatles. The phenomenon was unleashed because she's ferociously curious. How do I make my fans my family? And so, the second phenomenon was unveiled to me. But the third and final, that I find quite interesting, was in the time I spent with a man by the name of Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson, also known as the Dynamite Kid, he was the youngest heavyweight champion of the world in the realm of boxing. It took me 10 years to codify that man and come out of it with both earlobes intact. But I kid you not, it was no easy task. When I had a chance to really understand who he was, you've got to get back into the history books to realize why this man, who is a ferocious fighter both in life and in the ring, also too taps ferocious curiosity. Not normal curiosity, not like, I wonder how it'll go, but like, why won't it go? Ferocious curiosity served him well, and I'll tell you what phenomenon it unleashed. You see, to understand and appreciate what made him a very historically significant fighter and a character of our time, where online at any given time, there's a billion searches of his name at any given time. At any given time. This man, very young, was short, stocky, and stout. The slowest on the block in Brooklyn. And kids teased him every day. In fact, he had a pet pigeon, a handful, that he managed to catch and befriend. But one day, the key bully of the entire block had his hand on one of Mike's pigeons, his most beloved treasure, and was taunting Mike in such a way that he was threatening to kill the pigeon. And in a moment, he did. Snapped its neck, dropped the pigeon to the ground, and Mike was forever transformed. He went from short and stocky to indomitable and invincible force of reckoning. He struck that boy. One blow knocked him out cold. Mike leaned into the third phenomenon of being ferociously curious. And that was the phenomenon of embracing and welcoming chaos. Chaos, confusion, or crisis that brings upset or challenge. He leaned into it while most people run away. Play it easy, automate our life, and hope that technology figures it out. But Mike leaned in. Every time there was a disaster in his life, from his mother dying when he was young to when his mentor passed, his sister passed, he buried his own daughter. Here's a man that went from hero to zero, was jailed for doing something wrong, and still returned back to a life that's greater than ever. Because he leaned in rather than stepping back from the third phenomenon, the experience you have when you're ferociously curious. For Mike Tyson, to this day, I am proud to say that he now has a title, one that he never thought he'd ever have. And that is the title of being the oldest fighter to enter the ring. Those 8 rounds were not about Jake Paul. Those 8 rounds were not about Netflix. Those 8 rounds, as Mike would put it, was about getting paid. Getting paid, Rich. You can call me whatever you want. Daddy going home with a paycheck. For him, that was his legacy. But what you didn't see behind the scenes was in his corner was his daughter. On the stage was his son. Interviewing him was one of his other sons, his eldest. It wasn't a Mike Tyson fight. It was a family affair. And when he leaned into the chaos, confusion, and the crisis, the challenge, where they said, how can Mike Tyson come into the ring at 58 years of age who hasn't fought a bout in over 7,700 days? And he said, I'll give you 20 million reasons why I can. And so he did. Friends, to understand the characteristics, the attitudes, and behaviors of the rich and famous is to understand one thing, is you have them too. All of you are curious, yeah? But are you ferociously curious? Are you feverishly curious? Are you leaning in rather than zoning out? So for you, you've got to know that this conversation, which has been my life's work, I'm so desperate to share with you this fact. I am absolutely privileged to share with you that finding. That after all these years, for me, it wasn't about who I was or was not. It was just the one switch I didn't hit up and left on. I'm curious, but now I'm feverishly curious. And I hope you are too. So as you move on in your life, just always ask yourself, am I making a curious case for ferocious, feverish curiosity? Am I challenging what I'm told? Am I asking questions more than I should? Am I searching for new information in which I may not find and or Google may not have? And, most importantly, am I an explorer in my life? Searching for new realms of possibility that might just present a new access to a new phenomenon you've yet to experience. I've enjoyed today, and I appreciate you being here with me. Be feverish.